Hello everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw, it's Monday. On Mondays, we do tier lists, and on Wednesdays, we wear pink.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. Intel has told us there are at least 7.
Okay, I already see one. Give him. Okay.
They're the same picture.
Here we are in fabulous Season 17, where we're going to rank every single Pokemon inside of Pokemon Unite. I'm going to rank things kind of like for like. So Cinderace is going to be compared to Greninja, as opposed to Cinderace being directly compared to Zeraora or something like that. And this is going to be a tier list that kind of focuses on most every form of play outside of fully competitive 5 versus 5, because that's a whole different beast, and there are Pokemon that are way better and way worse inside that game mode. This is for just about everybody else who is playing Pokemon Unite in the regular ranked mode, whether that's solo, duo, trio. Before we hop into our tier list, I want to give a big shout out to today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Raycon, the everyday earbuds from Raycon. No, not Raycon, the convention for everyone named Ray that I tried to throw that was a massive failure. To be fair, I didn't go. My name's Jake. Felt like we made a lot of mistakes with Raycon, but not this Raycon. If you're anything like me when you're gaming, you're mainly spending your time vibing, and when I am vibing, I'm playing the game, like I'm playing Unite, and then I'm spending the rest of the time listening to something like a podcast, like You're on Fire, or watching one of my favorite streamers on a second monitor, and I've got all the audio piped right into my ears with Raycon. These bad little boys have 8 hours of playtime, 32 hours of battery life, and they're less than half the cost of other premium audio brands. They also have a ton of awesome features like customizable sound profiles, so you can adjust it whether you're listening to an audiobook or a podcast, or you're listening to music. You can also toggle between noise isolation and awareness mode. Awareness lets you be aware of things around you, but let's face it, who's aware of things around them? Am I right? I'm not. So if you want to support the channel and you want to pick up one of the best earbuds in the business, you can get a discount right now by using my link in the description. That's buyraycon.com/spragels. Use my link, you'll get 15% off, you'll get free shipping, and you get the best earbuds money can buy. Big shout out again to Raycon. Now, on to the video. Thank you so much, Raycon. I love you. Why won't you say I love you back? Our tiers for this week, we have our God tier where we only put one Pokemon in it. We're not frickin' Norse around here. We have our S tier. These Pokemon are crazy, crazy good, the best in the meta. We have our A+ tier. They're almost as broken as the S, and they're great choices. We have our A- tier. I guess I could have just had an A tier here. Fine, I'm getting rid of the minus. We have our A tier right here. The A tier are just extremely solid picks. There's gonna be something I feel like that's gonna separate the A+ and the A, and you're gonna see that as we go. We have our B tier. Ugh. So dumb. Hate that. Hate that. Still got the B tier. We have our C tier. These Pokemon are underperforming. They're not terrible, but boy, they're in a rough spot. We have our Decidueye Memorial tier. These are Pokemon who are just underperforming, have probably been underperforming for a while, and I would love to see the devs do something to them. And then we have our EX tier, which is where we're going to start. These Pokemon, Zacian, Mewtwo, and Mewtwo all hang out in our EX tier because for this season in ranked, once you hit master rank, and even before, as long as you have one master rank player inside your game, these Pokemon are banned from the rank mode. Are they good? Yes. Is the Zacian nerf bad? Yeah, it felt like it was kind of bad, but in general, these Pokemon are nuts, and we can't play them for this season in ranked, which has led to a really interesting season so far. I think, of course, with some of the big baddies out of the way, a lot of other Pokemon have slotted into some really important positions inside the game. Let's just start going through. Let's start with our attackers right now. So we're going to bring out sort of, I talked about Cinderace earlier. Let me bring out Cinderace, Greninja, where are you at, Duraludon, Decidueye can kind of hang out in this conversation too, if I could ever find that silly goose. There you go, Dragapult. So these are our kind of auto attackers. They're ADCs, you know, attack damage carries. You're just tapping that A button, doing lots of damage. They all have a different flavor of how they do it, and I'm really rating them kind of against each other because they sort of fill the same role inside the game. None of them particularly amazing in lane. Oftentimes you'll put them in the central area, but sometimes you just can't afford to do that. So let's see. Cinderace and Greninja, I think B is very fair for these Pokemon. They're both great carries, so they can get a lot of experience and help you carry a game by getting a ton of big KOs, but they also aren't amazing in this game right now. I think Duraludon is slightly better than the others, just because it has better secure on some of its last hitting. Its Unite move is a little better for ripping, and in general, Duraludon's win rate is always a bit higher than pretty much all of the other ADCs except one right now. And the reason for that being, I think not a lot of people play it. People who play it really understand how to secure with it, especially with Dragon Pulse. And a lot of opponents don't play against it, so when they run into it, they're just not sure what it's going to do, even though it's probably just going to rip Ray. I would put Duraludon slightly higher than this group. If I had a B+ category, and thank God I don't, I would say Duraludon would be closer to that than the A category, but here's where we are. Decidueye, I would also put into our A category. It's kind of veering into A+, but it's also the most punishable Pokemon in the entire game. It's so easy to KO this thing, and without a team supporting it, you can be in a lot of trouble. And then finally, Dragapult, I'm putting up into our S tier. Dragapult recently got some awesome buffs, and since then, it's one of the best solo queue Pokemon in the game, like solo, duo, trio, basically anything outside of 5 stacks where it seems to struggle, because it's kind of easy to coordinate a way to take it down. It does so well, and I think it's one of the best attackers in the game right now. Let's see. Let's move on to, we're still in attackers. Let's start talking about mages here. I'll just start moving them here into our C tier. These are kind of the mage-like Pokemon inside of Pokemon Unite. You know, they're doing a lot of damage from afar. We can talk about the rest of our attackers right here as well. They're all sort of in this category. They're like some different shades of them, but we'll talk about them all. Do we got all of our attackers? We do. Okay, great. Here we go. Where do we want to start? Let's start with someone who recently got some really nice buffs, and I think it is up in the A tier, and that's Sylveon. Sylveon had been struggling for a little while. It wasn't bad, but its Unite move cooldown was crazy. It could use a little bit of a buff, and it got just that. And right now, I think it's doing awesome in the game. I really love it. A is a great place for it. Maybe even into A+. Sometimes it's a really, really solid pick right now. I think an A+ pick right now is Gardevoir. Gardevoir has been doing well for a while, but this Unite move change is massive. Guardy got a change, so it basically can unite at every single big fight inside of Pokemon Unite, and I think it's in a super solid place. Not surprising because it just recently got a battle pass. Cramorant I would also put up into our A+ tier, specifically for the dive build. Extremely high skill, extremely high reward, a really tough Pokemon to deal with, something people don't play against a lot, and super high skill players do very, very well with Cram. A9 I'd probably put in the A9 tier. The A tier I think is pretty solid for this Pokemon. It's not the best thing in the game, but it's a really great mage. Both builds are doing well, especially after their recent buffs. Alola Ninetales is just doing pretty great. Pikachu I'd probably put into our B tier. It's not bad at all. It's had moments where I think it was a little better in the meta. Right now, I feel like the meta's got some pretty good dive to it, and it can actually get to Pika and deal with it a little more easily than it could, say, in the Mewtwo Y meta. But I really don't think there's anything wrong with Pikachu. I think it's a very solid pick. It feels much more like a support mage than some of the others that are like heavily damage dealers. Espeon, all these Eevees, man, they're just crushing it. Espeon's doing great. A tier, probably the least played evolution that I see in Unite, but it's still a super solid choice. Delphox as well, really nice. I actually like it most with Fire Spin right now, even though Mystical Fire Flame Charge does have a lot of outplay potential. I think Fire Spin's just actually really, really strong, and you don't see Delphox as much in the central area anymore, so it's a reasonable build to take from lane, right? Glaceon I'd put in our A+ tier. Glaceon's nuts. It just feels like this Pokemon is perpetually being either broken or close to broken, and that's exactly where I think Glaceon is right now. Both builds are good. Icicle Spear is just dumb. It's point and click, and it does so much damage. It's just dumb, and it's dumb. You're so dumb. Let's see. Venusaur I'd put into our A tier. I think Venusaur's really, really good. You see a lot of teams get some big value out of it competitively, even though I've noticed it's kind of fallen off a little bit because the Eevees have been so incredibly popular lately. But Venusaur is still really powerful. Petal Dance, Giga Drain works well into a lot of the brawlers that you see in the game right now. And then Solar Beam is just extremely powerful. Like your Unite move with Energy Amp into a Solar Beam is a delete button. Venu's doing great. Mew, I'm going to put in the A+ tier. I'm pulling it out of the S tier, which might be a mistake, but I think Mew is really fantastic. It did get some nerfs, you know, to Solar Beam and stuff like that a little while back. It's not bad at all. In the hands of the right player, it's probably still in the S tier. You don't see it as much. It feels like the meta's moved on from it a little bit, but still a great choice. Inteleon is kind of the same thing. This used to be S tier levels broken. Now it takes someone with a higher level of skill, because Liquidation really isn't the call anymore, but Snipe Shot is still extremely good, and Inteleon's kit overall is incredible. Its Unite move is unbelievable. Its damage just from its autos are insane. I think A+ is a fair place to put it, even though, honestly, I really don't see much Inteleon in my games anymore. And then we have Chandelure. Chandelure, I would actually move Shandy up into maybe our A+ tier. It was buffed a little while back, and with Flamethrower and Poltergeist getting buffs, I actually think this has just become one of the most difficult mages to deal with, because it has such incredible uptime on its move, and it zones so well. That being said, a lot like Decidueye, you can kind of punish this Pokemon pretty easily, so that's probably the big drawback for someone like Chandelure. But in general, I actually think the buffs are really great, and the more I play it, the more I play against it, I just feel like it's extremely powerful right now. Let's talk about some Speedsters. Let's do Speedsters next. Our Speedsters are Gengar, Absol, Zeraora, Dodrio, Talonflame, Zoroark, Leafeon, and Meowscarada. We actually got a decent amount of Speedsters in the game right now, given that last year we saw a few added, right? We got Leafeon and Meowscarada brought to the game. Our Speedsters are all pretty good, except like maybe one notable exception. In general, they're extremely high skill Pokemon, but if you're good with them, there's also high output to them. I don't think any of our Speedsters to me feel like S tier. To me, S tier is not only something that is kind of broken, but also something that you don't even have to necessarily be that skilled with to pull off. Like, all of our Speedsters, I feel like you have to have a decent level of skill to get top value for. In the hands of a top ranked player with these Pokemon like Dodrio, Zoroark, even Leafeon maybe, you could maybe make an argument that they're closer to the S tier, but you just need so much skill to really pull it off. You're not going to run into too many of these Pokemon that are that good inside a game. However, they are really strong. I would say Dodrio and Zoroark for me sit in the A+ tier, Leafeon in the A tier. Now, competitively, in 5 stacks right now and in tournament play, Leafeon might be the best Pokemon in the game. But without coordinated play, it feels like it's just not as capable of punishing the enemy. Not that it's bad, it's an A tier choice for sure, but in competitive play, it might be the best Pokemon in the game. I'm not even kidding. Meowscarada, I think, is also doing pretty well. I think A tier is fair. The problem with Meowscarada is it's a pretty high skill Pokemon to play, and a lot of people are not good with Meowscarada yet. It takes a lot of practice, but if you get there, I think you can make some incredible stuff happen with Meowscarada. Zera, Absol, and Talon, I'm all going to put into our B tier. They're all really good for different reasons. Talon has probably played the worst out of the 3. Zera is a weird one, but I think Zera is honestly being slept on a little bit, maybe even by this particular tier list. I think it could be slightly higher, probably into our A tier in the right hands, but you just don't see a lot of them. And then Absol is the same kind of situation. I think it's actually better than people give it credit for, but you don't see a lot of it. And then we have Gengar. I'm going to leave Gengar in our C tier. I don't think it's terrible. I think it can be a solo queue monster, but I think, as always, Gengar just gets into a weird position in the meta where, you know, it's so hard to slot into a team. There are so many Speedsters. Like, if someone was saying, oh, well, we could either have a Dodrio or a Gengar on our team, like, there's no question what you'd rather have, right? But it's not terrible. However, things that are hanging out in our C tier, I think, could use a little love. Not a huge buff or anything, but just something to kind of get it a little more back into this meta. Let's start taking a look at, speaking of meta, let's start taking a look at something really meta, and let's bring our defenders out here. Defenders are crazy inside of Pokemon Unite. They are incredibly meta. Having one on the team versus not having one is, I mean, it's night and day. Defenders are so incredibly important. All of them are good. One of them is kind of weird, which we'll talk about. I'll talk about it first. Greedent is the only Pokemon that I'm leaving from the defenders in the Decidueye Memorial tier. It's not horrible, but its position in the game is difficult. It's this weird harasser tank sort of thing. It doesn't tank well enough in the final fights. However, high skill Greedents can still get a lot of value, but it's just a really weird Pokemon for Pokemon Unite right now, and in general, I think it could use some buffs. The rest of our defenders, on the other hand, are all varying levels of pretty dang good. On the lowest rung, I would put Snorlax and Mamo. Both I like, but I'm also comparing these to other defenders who are crazy, crazy incredible. I like Snorlax, I like Mamo, I think they're both pretty good. They don't have sort of some of the self-recovery that some of the other defenders have, which can be pretty amazing, especially in solo queue. Another rung up in the A tier, I would put things like Goodra, maybe Crustle in our A tier. This feels like Crustle could be A or A+. Crustle's really great right now. In the A+ tier for me, I love Trevenant, I love Lapras, and then finally in our S tier, I would move 3 defenders up there. Slowbro, Blastoise, and Umbreon. Umbreon may be the best out of the 3. Not that I'm really ranking these against each other inside their own particular tiers. All of these defenders are insane for different reasons. They're all great. Slowbro's Unite move is still broken. Umbreon's Unite move is, and the rest of its kit's still broken. And then Blastoise is one of the best top lane Pokemon, if not the best top lane Pokemon in the entire game. Does so well in lane, and really any build you run on it, it's really incredible too. So right now, I feel like in general, defenders are doing great, and there really isn't a bad one to pick except for Greedent, which is not really in the same sort of conversation. It's a different thing, and I don't know how much you need that thing. Our supporters are also doing really well inside of Pokemon Unite. I gotta say, I do kind of love it that supporters and defenders do well, because you want those classes to be extremely important. You just want to figure out a way for your solo queue allies to pick them, because for whatever reason, they won't, forcing you to pick them every single game. However, there are a lot of great options here. Taking a look at all of our supporters, there's only one that I would leave in our Decidueye Memorial tier, and that's Sableye. Sableye is not bad. Sableye can be extremely useful. However, your Sableye is on your team is terrible. It's not going to do anything, and you're not going to get a lot of value out of it. It is actually, I think it is surprisingly one of the highest skill Pokemon inside of Pokemon Unite to provide big value for your team. It wouldn't seem like it, because depending on the Sableye you see, it could seem like the lowest skill thing in the game. It's not. It's just it's in a really weird spot. Both of these Pokemon almost have kits where you can't really buff them too much, because then you make it like super annoying and overpowered, but then also maybe you just have to rework certain aspects of what they do. The rest of our supporters don't really fit into that category. We've got our 2 sort of tank supporters that are kind of essentially defenders in a way, and that's going to be Wiggly and Mime. I think Mime's actually doing better than I expected. I'm going to put Mime up into our B tier right here. It could actually be even higher, possibly into our A tier. It's a pretty good tank right now. Resonant Guard has been great, and the buff to Confusion has been really nice, even though I've seen a lot of people running Power Swap Psychic, and that's working really well too. I really think Resonant Guard has just been amazing for so many Pokemon, Mime specifically. Wiggly, I might be valuing it too high, but I think Wiggly's awesome right now. The only problem with Wiggly is you could run into an Umbreon on the enemy team, and then you've essentially given your entire Unite move over to an Umbreon that hopefully is smart enough to wait to use its Unite move until you do, so they can steal all of your shields. Boy, it was hard for me to get through that sentence. I struggled, guys, from start to finish. As I was talking about that, it was just chaos. Wiggly's Unite move is great, right? It just gives your whole team a shield, reduces crowd control while they have that shield, or negates crowd control while they have that shield. Umbreon can steal essentially that entire Unite move from your team and take it for itself. I don't think it would even get to the S tier regardless. However, that's one of the issues that maybe pushes it closer to A. But I really like the changes to Wiggly. I really like the buffs. Eldegoss, I think, is probably A or A+. Amazing. Great Pokemon. Tons of damage. Tons of healing. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, please. Eldegoss is awesome. Hoopa, for me, is probably closer to A. Now, Again, this is for non-coordinated play. Coordinated play, it could be one of the best Pokemon in the game. Non-coordinated, sometimes it's just really hard to get your team to do anything that Hoopa is trying to get them to do. And for that reason, I'm not saying it's bad. It's still excellent. It's still in the A tier. But it could be... It's easier to get your team to just take a Pollen Puff, I guess is what I'm saying. Clefable, S tier. I think this thing is broken. One of the most broken things in the entire game. Right there with Comfey. Now, here's the thing. Comfey is not on its own broken, of course. However, it is the broken thing igniter. If there's anything difficult to deal with on the enemy team, and the Comfey has even half a brain, even a quarter of a brain maybe. I'm not sure how much brain they need, but it could be just a quarter. A quarter of a brain, they will sit on that Pokemon and make them an unbelievable nuisance to deal with. Outside of coordinated play, I really do think it's one of the most broken things in Unite. However, it all depends on who's playing it, right? I'm missing Blissey, right? There you are. Blissey for me is also in the A+ tier. It's not quite Wiggly, not quite Clefable territory, but it's right there. Blissey is incredible. All these supporters are really, really good. If I had to rank them against each other, I'd probably put Blissey maybe the highest amongst these three and put Wiggly as the lowest amongst these. But again, supporters are awesome inside of Pokemon Unite, and all of them are crazy, crazy good. Even Sableye, but I just don't know how you get a lot of value out of it in the game. And now we finally have our all-rounders. Our most recent Pokemon release, Metagross, is an all-rounder, so we saved the Metagrossest for last. Let's bring our all-rounders out here so we can start talking about them. An interesting category. There are a ton of them inside the game. I feel like it's sort of a place you put a Pokemon where you're like, yeah, it's just like fights, right? Yeah, fights, great. And here are all of these Pokemon that fight. So, our all-rounders, all around, they're pretty good. Let's start organizing them a bit. I think Metagross probably sits in the A tier for me. It's either A or A+. It's really good. Obviously, it was S tier, God tier levels broken, but they changed that. I think A or A+, somewhere in here is pretty fair. It's really strong, especially early, and especially if you're able to just sort of, you know, time your attacks so you get the shields that you need. It's not as broken as it was before, and its Unite move is kind of wonky. It's not as terrible as it was before either, by the way. In general, I think Metagross is doing really well. I think A tier is probably a fair place to put it. Hanging out in the A tier with it is going to be Garchomp. I really like Garchomp in the game. I think it's solid. It doesn't see a ton of play, but I think it performs pretty well into a lot of what you see in the meta, especially given that it's the kind of Pokemon that can dive in and grab some of these squishier Pokemon. Machamp. I'm going to put Machamp in our Decidueye Memorial tier. And yeah, I think, here's the thing. I don't think Machamp is really that bad, but I do think Machamp at this point feels kind of forgotten inside of Pokemon Unite. I think they could tune it up just a little bit here and there and bring it back to relevance. You just never see them. They're not that useful when you do see them. I think Machamp could use some buffs inside the game, so I'm putting it here. I'm going to put it alongside Charizard as well. Charizard is not awful. However, it is so confusing compared to a lot of this roster. It essentially has a Unite move that is like Mega, but Mewtwo's do that for free. They just do that by pressing A. And it's the worst of the three starters by a country mile, which I believe is longer than a mile. Someone's gonna have to look that up. In general, I'm putting it here because there's no question it could use some buffs. I don't think anyone playing the game could see Char and be like, no, don't touch it. No, it could definitely use some buffs. Even though I do love me some Charizard. I'm also going to put Scizor Scyther in this tier, not because I hate them, even though I always rank them low on my tier list. It's just because, guys, I really want these Pokemon to be buffed and to be more playable. If I had to slightly move them into the C tier, like, fine, you could say they're C tier, but I really do think you could do a little bit to all of these Pokemon that we've looked at so far, and it would make them much more relevant in the meta, because right now they're pretty irrelevant. Speaking of another irrelevant one, I'm going to leave this in the C tier, because I'm not really sure what they're going to need to do with it, but that's going to be Water Bear. Water Bear is weird. It was nerfed, and honestly, the nerfs feel pretty substantial. It's not terrible, but man, it's so much worse than it was, and its level up to level 5 is abysmal. I think Water Bear is not doing great. On the other hand, I think Dark Bear is doing much better. I'll at least put it in the B tier. It might even be slightly higher. In general, Urshifu stocks are way down. And if they want this Pokemon to come back, they probably need to tune up both builds just a little bit here. Lucario, I think, is doing fine. It's either B or A, somewhere in here. If there was a B+, which there isn't, thank God, that's where Lucario would probably reside. But it's somewhere in that realm right there. Zarina, actually doing a lot better than I think people expected for this Pokemon. It got 2 rounds of buffs. And after the second round, I feel like Zarina is kind of back. It's not unbelievably overpowered or anything like that, but in the hands of a skilled player, it's doing very well. And it's really good at picking off some of like some of the big bad targets in the game right now. Like if you look at tons of things that are high tier, Zoroark, Dodrio, Chandelure, like all of these Pokemon, they are so delicious for a Zarina. It just jumps right in. It can stomp or triple axle, pick it right up into the air with a Unite move, and you just deleted one of the biggest carries on the enemy team. I think Zarina's doing pretty good. Dragonite's fine. Dragonite's like a B tier for me. Not bad. Not amazing. Solid. Dragonite's doing good. Same thing with Sword. Sword's doing pretty good. I actually saw some players use this in a tournament recently. Specifically, Overlord from LG was back on the Sword, and even then, it was kind of fine. I think that's where Sword sits, is kind of fine. I'm going to leave Azu, I don't know, it's kind of fine and it's kind of C. Azu's kind of fine and kind of C. I like it. There's no question they could buff like half its kit. It's fine. Buzzwole. I think Buzzwole's one of the most unbelievably powerful Pokemon inside of Pokemon Unite. Buzzwole's insane. It's insane competitively. It's insane not competitively. It is such a difficult Pokemon to deal with at such an early level. It is not level gated. It hits 5 and it's a menace right away. Like, I think Buzzwole's honestly way better than people give it credit for. I also think this about Tyranitar. A tier I think is fair. I think Tyranitar is way better than people give it credit for too. It's a hard Pokemon to play, to be fair. You need to get a lot of experience and you need to really be on top of what you're doing with Tyranitar. But if you are, you're a real force inside these games, especially when you're not seeing like the Mewtwo's and things like this as much or at all once you start to rank up. I think you're just in a really good spot with kind of a late game monster like Titar. Blaziken, I think, is awesome. I think it's great. Same thing with Mimikyu. I think they're both A+. These are awesome Pokemon. They're really powerful in the right hands. They're not S tier levels broken. Blaziken didn't, but Mimikyu obviously had a little bit of that for a little while. But in general, these things are just crazy, crazy good. And now it's time to crown our God tier Pokemon of the week. You know, I was going back and forth about this for a little while, and I just think it's still true. I just don't think anything really compares to this annoying pink blob right now. I do think Clefable is our godliest of the God tier that we have inside of Pokemon Unite currently. It's just such a mean boy. And I don't know what else you do about it, really. It's the healing is so much. The gravity and Follow Me are crazy. It's just one of the most difficult things to deal with. A team with a Clefable versus a team with no support. Oh man, like what an absolute nightmare you have in front of you. I would love to hear from you. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What do you think I got too high? What do you think I got too low? As always, please be respectful of each other, but I'd love to hear from everybody. And now we do this.
Boop, 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 ba, 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 ba. Do, 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 do.
And that's why it's Hoopa. There's no question Hoopa is the best Pokemon in the game. Just the ability to bring you into a fight, even if you basically have no coordination on your team. Hoopa forces coordinated play, which is one of the most powerful things that you can do inside of Pokemon Unite. That's why it has to be our God tier Pokemon, while at the same time, of course, we see kind of the usual suspects down in our D tier. Blastoise falling from grace in a huge way after everyone kind of figured out how to counter it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I love you. I'll see y'all next time. Nerf Hoopa. Nerf it, nerf it, nerf it.